Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Writers Podcast. I have with me today writer Jennifer Shaw, a returning guest. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Last time you couldn't do it visually because you were under the weather, but so it's awesome to see you in the flesh this time, so to speak.
Yes.
And we're talking about your fourth book in your Callum Walker series, which is titled Forsaken Souls, correct?
Correct. Yes. It's
All
coming out
right.
June 1st.
June 1st. Awesome. And so what's your elevator pitch for book 4?
So basically it's just following my character's journey, trying to heal from the traumas that he suffered, but at the same time coming to terms with who he is and trying to move on, accept family, friends, healing. It's kind of a lot of mental health issues that I'm presenting. But there's
Okay.
also this big background brewing war, but it's not a war over power or territory. It's much more than that.
Okay, very cool. Now, you've got three other books in the series, and the titles of those are what?
So book 1 is The Ascension, and then
Mhm.
book 2 is The Convergence, and then I've got The Fractured Veil, and then Forsaken Souls is the 4th book in my series.
All right, very good. So you are a writer of quite a few series, actually. You've got The Ascension, The Convergence, The Fractured Veil, and Forsaken Souls. And do you consider yourself primarily a fantasy writer, or?
Oh, no, I've dabbled in other genres and stuff,
Okay.
but the only thing I don't write is I don't write history because it's boring and I fall asleep, and I don't write mystery because I'm not smart enough to figure out whodunits, and although I have elements of romance in my books, I don't write spicy romance. Nobody needs to see in my books what happens behind closed doors.
Okay. So then what do you call yourself?
Anything that's got action adventure or a
Okay.
good concept, I like. I like
All
to think
right.
outside the box. I'm a very what if person. So whatever genre fits into that what if. I really like the sci-fi and the fantasy because they're so flexible.
Okay. Very cool. So we've probably covered this in your previous interview, but just to refresh it and for first-time listeners, what's your background in reading? Who are your favorite authors and books?
Oh, obviously Stephen King is up there.
Okay.
I was a big fan of the Lord of the Rings. I read all 3 Lord of the Rings books over Christmas holiday. I'm a big fan of the Game of Thrones series, and I've recently discovered Brandon Sanderson, and I'm
Oh,
thinking that's
wow.
gonna be one of my top favorites I'm gonna add to the list.
Okay. Well, yeah, he's very prolific,
Mhm.
even more than King. I think he wrote 5 books during the COVID pandemic.
Yes. There's
That's
not a whole lot to
impressive.
do otherwise, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so uh, your background, just briefly, did you always want to be a writer?
Oh, yeah, I started writing been writing now for about 34 years. I started when I was younger. I needed an outlet. I was very introverted, small town,
Mhm.
didn't get out a lot, and I was very introverted, so I needed that creative outlet,
Mhm.
and I had a hard time finding books that I wanted to read, and my mom bought me a typewriter at the time. Yeah, I'm that old. And so I started writing. It was started as a hobby, became a passion. Now it's just an obsession slash cheaper than therapy, but I do remember a time when I was 16 or so where I
Mhm.
was like, "Ah, I'd really love to be an author, be published, and let people enjoy my work." But I
Mhm.
was never, I never figured it would happen, and I was too shy to share.
Ah, okay. So what brought you out of your shell?
So in 2019, I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and I started to
Ah.
think, well, maybe writing is my special interest.
Mhm.
So I got brave and I had finished my manuscript for The Ascension, and I thought, okay, I'm going to send this to an editor. The worst they can say is it sucks. And if they do, then I know I'll just write for myself. But they came back and they said, this doesn't suck. You should publish. So
Mm.
2 years later, I made it happen.
Awesome. And do you self-publish, or are you with a pub print?
I'm an indie author. I'm
Indie
published
author?
through Maverick First Press, Inc.
Okay. And how are you finding that experience?
It's been a huge learning curve. Like
Mhm.
I'm a mom, I stay at home right now. I worked in healthcare and stuff, but this is completely different than anything I've ever done in the past. So it's a huge learning curve.
Right. And did you reach out to anybody? Like I know Calgary has quite the active writing community. I
Mhm.
don't know if you
Yeah.
reached
They
out
have
to people there or.
there's a couple writing groups that I had attempted to join locally, but they were more of a sit down with coffee and chat with friends. It wasn't really a writing
Mhm.
group. It was just a bunch of writers who got together, which is fine.
Sure.
But I needed more help with the actual mechanics of writing and kind of like
Mhm.
bouncing ideas, like how many different ways can you say a person sits, without repeating yourself. So
Right.
I joined the Alexandra Writing Society. They have a lot of classes and stuff that they do for
Mhm.
those different mechanics. And I'm also a member of the Quill and Cup, which is a group of women authors who we do a lot of Zoom meetings, and they also do classes and stuff.
Right. And do you find that that whole reach out process is made you less of an introvert?
No, I'm still very much an introvert. I put on a
Oh.
big mask. Peopling is scary. I go out, I do events, I force myself out. I do a lot of book signings. This weekend, I'm doing a book signing in Edmonton.
Mm.
And I've just sort of forced myself to get out of my shelf because if I don't, then I will never know what I can accomplish. So I have to wear a mask. Unfortunately, I have to. That's what they call it with autism, where you're hiding who you are, you're hiding your anxiety, and you put on a mask, so to speak.
Right.
And then you come home at the end of the day and you hide in a dark room and decompress because peopling is scary. It's exhausting. It's anxiety inducing, and
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. And masks is a often a very used theme in literature as well. So I assume that with your writing, that's part and parcel of the stories that you tell.
Yeah, I am not my character,
Hmm.
um, but I have to put myself into my character's head, so to speak,
Right.
which is really fun when I'm writing bad guys.
Right.
I had to with my first book, I got in touch with my inner bad guy, which is really fun actually.
Hmm.
But I do have to kind of put myself into that position, imagine that I'm there and how would I react.
Right. Okay. And out of all the books that you've written, do you identify with any one particular character more than others?
Not really. I think every single character that I've written has some aspect of my personality,
Hmm.
um, but I don't really identify with any of them.
Okay. That's interesting. So you're not vicariously working out your issues through your characters then, or are you?
Well, not so much with my characters, but with my overall theme of my book,
Hmm.
which is my character that was born with this ability to use magic, and he's trying to figure out where he belongs. Does he belong in this world that we live in, or does he
Hmm.
belong on the other side of this veil that separates this magical realm? And he's too human for here, but he's too magical. Sorry, he's too magical for here, but he's too human for there. And then somebody
Hmm.
told me one time, a reader said, "Hey, that's kind of like your journey trying to figure out your place in this world with autism." And I was like, "Oh, I had not thought about that." So the overall arc is actually my journey through life.
Right.
But as far as the characters, other than my main character's journey to figure out where he belongs, I don't really, none of them are truly wholly me. They're just parts of me.
Okay. So for your writing process, then, are you a very structured person? Like, do you have to plot out, or are you just do you like to discover?
I like to have some of that freedom when
Hmm.
I've kind of turned into a little more plotting because there's a lot of details as you get farther into a series. There's a lot of
Sure.
details that you have to keep track of.
Yep.
But for the most part, I start with the beginning, I know where I end, and I have an idea of somewhere in the middle that needs to shift toward that ending. Unless there's specific details that I need to bring forward, I let the rest fill itself in.
Okay. Cool. And do you get do your characters surprise you at all?
Oh, absolutely, all the
Uh,
time.
oh, that's
There's
a pretty
times
cool.
when yeah, I call it
Yeah.
the zone.
The zone. Yeah.
Yeah, where I don't know what is gonna happen. I've got my character set up in this situation. I'm like, "I don't know what's gonna happen," and I'm just writing along, and then I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that was gonna happen. I wanna follow this along," and it'll take me to places that are like, "Wow, that came out of my head," or I have to stop and think, "What is wrong with me?" Because
Yeah.
it just sort of writes itself, and I'm along for the ride.
Yeah. When you get in the zone and the muse talks to you, then the
Yes.
magical things can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that must be part of the process that, or I shouldn't make that assumption, but is that part of the process you enjoy the most, or are you actually like doing the editing and
Oh,
the second, third drafts or whatever?
I enjoy all of the creative prospects of it. Editing
Okay.
is the bane of my existence.
Oh, okay.
I am not I It's getting better because I'm
Mhm.
learning a bit more, I'm teaching myself because I was not an English major. I had no interest in English. I'm a math and science geek.
Mm,
Proud of it. And English was one of those I never failed, but I never excelled either. And now I've had to teach myself a lot of the writing mechanics and stuff and work with my editors to teach me how to write better.
mm,
So editing is still hard for me, but it's getting better.
okay. So that's interesting that you have a math background. Then my question would be, do you find writing characters and character motivations hard, or
No,
what?
I have an interest in psychology, and I was actually
Okay.
I was pursuing my master's in counseling before I became a mom, and then I had to kind of sidetrack because, family first.
Ah,
But I've always had that interest in psychology and what makes us tick, basically. I've grown up in a family where we've had a lot of mental health issues, and that's always kind of, I've kind of developed that interest in psychology to kind of figure out where do these stem from and how can we help, kind of thing.
right.
So.
Okay. Do you have a group of first readers, beta readers
Mhm.
for your books?
Yeah,
And
I am always looking for, good beta readers because, I mean, yes, family, friends is great. They'll read your book and they'll tell you, "Yes, it's great," but they're not really that biased.
right.
So, I'm always kinda looking for, like, people that I can hand it to who will not only read it, who will not only give me unbiased opinions,
Hmm.
but will actually tell me what areas need to be improved.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
most of them
usually, what
sorry.
areas is it? Is it plot or character?
I will usually give them a list and I'll be like, "Okay, I want you to look at these things like plots, character
Hmm.
development, dialogue. Can you visualize the scene? Are my descriptions too much or too little? Um,
Right.
how's the flow and the pacing and the clarity?"
Hmm. Okay. And do you have any like idiosyncrasies that you have to be on the constant lookout for? Like I know, like certain writers, they say they use the word that too much. Do you have to like
Mhm.
go through your manuscript and try to weed out problem words?
Oh, yeah, there's a list of words that I use quite often, and I know,
Okay.
because I have the autism and I didn't realize it was an issue, I had an editor point out that I had absolutely in my first early drafts, I had absolutely no physical descriptions of my characters, and
Hmm.
then so I had to figure out how to write physical descriptions because I just don't look at those things,
Okay.
but I do tend to focus a lot on eyes.
Hmm.
I don't know why. It's just everybody's got I've read some books where I'm like, "Well, that author focuses on the hair a lot." We just have our own things we focus on.
Yeah. So then do you get into real detailed descriptions of your characters? Because I know, like, as a fellow Stephen King fan, he kind of just does a general outline and he lets the reader fill in
Mhm.
the small details.
Yeah, I'll give some, like, basic information, some hints. I like to kinda sprinkle it throughout the stories and stuff instead
Right.
of just dropping a bolo on you,
Sure.
and, but I do try to tend to make it as vague as possible so you can imagine the person yourself.
Okay. Very cool. So let's turn to your book then. The protagonist of your story is Callum Walker, right?
Yes.
And can you just refresh our listeners what he's all about?
Okay, so he fits into my story where there's our world, our time, coexisting magical realm. There's a
Hmm.
veil that separates us. We can't see or cross this veil. We don't have magic, but these creatures that do can and have, and they've been the source of inspiration for our mythologies. And then
Okay.
Callum Walker is a young man born with the ability to use magic. Humans don't have magic, so this is a rarity. And he doesn't know why, and he's trying to make the most of it. And he ends up getting embroiled in what's going on in this magical realm. And then we follow him through the series where he's trying to figure out where he belongs. He's trying to master his abilities and just survive. He's very much introverted, very conservative. He would be happy to have just given up these powers or not had them at all, but keeps getting dragged in.
Mm.
The saying, if you didn't have bad luck, you'd have no luck, and he's got the worst luck in the world.
Right. Okay. So, where is he in terms of his arc at the start of book four?
At the start of book 4, he's been through some trauma in the third book. The veil
Mhm.
that separates humanity from this magical realm has been fractured from
Okay.
the title, Fractured Veil. And he feels culpable for it because his actions led to that. And so, him and another character that we meet in the third book are heading to the Temple of the Veil to try to fix the damage. Unbeknownst to them, they're walking into enemy territory, and this war is brewing between
Mm.
the elves in the north who are out, friendly, and the elves in the south who are not. But
Mm.
this war is, like I said, not about territory or power. It's about something else. It's about complete
Okay.
domination and stealing
Mm.
from us something that cannot be replaced.
Okay. And is this conflict, does it have the potential to carry over into the real world?
Yes, there's always that danger because this veil, those magical creatures can cross in. They choose not
Okay.
to.
All right.
But they can cross in. They can see through it. They've watched us grow and develop as a species. They had some influence in the development of our language, but we are completely oblivious to them. We have no magic. We have no power.
Right.
Yeah.
So do they view science as magic then, or
No, no.
no?
And their world is very much lacking in science because they don't need it. They have magic. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Okay. Are they roughly, well, one's a fantasy world and the other, like, does the story take place in present day, real
Mhm.
world?
Yeah.
So is the fantasy world, it's because it's magic based, obviously they don't have the same technology, but are they in the same time scale, or is like we're in the 22nd century, are they in the 22nd century too, or are they in the a
Yeah, they're in
different
the same
time?
it's not like you're traveling back in time when you cross the veil. It's just that
Okay.
because they don't need technology, their way of life is more, medieval than ours because they don't have
Right.
to have that technology. So there's kings
Right.
and queens and, you know, different different, races of beings have their own religion and governance and stuff, but there's just a lack of technology, and it's more of a medieval nature
Okay.
inspired type lifestyles.
Okay. So you mentioned off the top that you had just reread the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm wondering, was that kind of just for pleasure or for research?
No, I read that a long time ago. I read that when I was back in college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
I was a little reluctant to read books because I'm afraid of,
right.
being inspired by something in a book and then
Right.
inadvertently putting it into my own. So I actually do a lot more writing than reading,
Right.
but
Yeah.
my to be read list is just keeps growing and growing because every book signing or event I go to, people are recommending me to read something else. So,
Right. Uh, the reason I was asking about that Tolkien is because he's obviously set the template for fantasy stories that's,
yeah.
encompasses quite a breadth of not just races, but mythology and languages and so forth. So I'm wondering what kind of special beings inhabit the magical realm.
Well, obviously, there's like the typical ones you'd expect, like elves, dwarves, fairies. I've tried to go back to the original mythology and just try to build them from the ground up,
Okay.
instead of just relying on what's common knowledge. Although what's common knowledge has kind of bases in the original mythologies. At the
Right.
same time, I've tried to give them all their own governance and their own motivations and traditions and cultures and stuff like that. I've also brought in things from other, branches of mythology. So in the third book, we see, the Furies, which are the goddesses of vengeance and retribution. We see the Harpies, from the second book, and they follow into the third. I've also introduced these creatures in the second book called Dryads,
Hmm.
and there are also dragons in the first book. They show up, and then they show up again later. And then there's
Hmm.
this history between elves, that I've kind of introduced in the fourth novel.
Okay. And is there anything like orcs or dwarfs
Oh,
or
yes, there's orcs, there's ogres. Eventually, we will see dragons, or more
okay.
dragons, and we will see giants, and there's deities and such that kinda interfere every now and then, and,
Hmm.
so there's different mythologies, out there. I've also got vampires.
Oh,
In the
wow.
first book, they show up as sort of a passing they're less into the story, but they do return in the 5th book, and
Mm.
there's a reason. I don't just throw them in there randomly and such. Um,
Mhm.
there's different fairies are the ones that are more varied because
Mhm.
it's a difference between cats and dogs. You can have cats and they relatively look the same. They pretty much look the same, but dogs, you can have many different shapes and sizes of dogs, just like fairies.
Okay, cool. That's a lot of balls to juggle. How do you keep all that stuff straight?
Yeah, if I didn't write, I wouldn't sleep.
So do you have like a lot of sticky notes or do you have a wiki page? Like how do you keep track of everything?
I usually get up in the middle of the night and start writing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I can't sleep. It's mostly just in my head. I don't like to write. Like, unless I'm putting it into a story, I don't like writing notes for myself, although I have had to do some of that. If I wake up and I'm just like, I've got a notebook beside my bed, I'm just like, okay, must write this. Here's the points and stuff. And then I have to write it in the morning and stuff. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm learning how to do that.
Very good. So you've mentioned several times that you have like ADHD and that. Do you find that it in some ways it's helpful? Because I think you can get very focused,
Oh, yeah.
maybe to the detriment of the world at times, but
Yes. I know. I I've equated autism, and I've tried to explain it because my boys are also on the spectrum. I've got 2 boys.
Mhm.
It's like with autism and ADHD, it's like having a computer and you've got every possible program open and running all at the same time. And
Right.
your brain's trying to do everything and you don't miss anything. You've got music playing here, video playing here, something's loading here. And, when you're in a hyper focus, you're doing everything and you're just in there.
Mhm.
Sometimes your computer needs to reset and you get the little swirly wheel of death and you have to restart everything and stuff. But I don't miss, like, that's the thing with the autistic brain. There's no filter. There's no, specificity. It's everything or nothing. So
Mhm.
I notice everything, but I've also been a out of the box thinker as well. And I think that's a common thing. I'm learning that that's a common thing amongst autistics.
Okay.
Is to just think, "Well, why do we do that? And what if we did this?" And so the what ifs help me to come up with ideas.
Cool. Cool. Do you um how do you react to reviews in that then? Do you tend not to pay much attention to them or
I
do
try
you
to keep
take them to the heart?
yeah, it's hard not to. I mean, some of them.
Sure.
I try to keep an open mind because,
Mhm.
if somebody's, if somebody's just offhand saying that they don't like this book, but they're not really giving a reason, like, I would, if nobody else has said that,
Yeah.
and I have to take it as kind of like, well, maybe this is a personal response. But if some
Mhm.
people are saying the exact same thing all the time, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to look into this. What am I doing wrong? And then I start researching that,
Mhm.
which can be very dangerous because I can fall into a hyper focus and sit down at 8 a.m. and not get up till 8 p.m. and forget that the world has existed and not eat or drink or move. So I have to
Right.
set alarms too.
Yeah. 'Cause, m my experience is that, people that do have, like, ADHD and autism, they tend to take criticism more personally
Yes. Yeah.
than normal, and that's hard for them to let go of it sometimes. Are you very
It
sensitive?
I do find that, like, if somebody says something about how, like, I think there was some mention at one point where somebody didn't think my characters developed enough in each book.
Mhm.
And, so then I'm like talking, I got, certain people that I bounce ideas like, what do you think about this comment? Like, am I, because I don't always interpret things socially, I struggle. So,
Okay.
I have to rely on my people to tell
Mhm.
me, am I overreacting? Is this a personal thing? Is this an actual thing?
Right.
And my editor is part of that circle, so she'll give me some advice as well. She'd be like, "No, no, I think that, nobody else has said that, so I think you're good."
Right. Right. So, you mentioned off the top too that, your Callum Walker series deals with mental issues as well.
Yes.
You wanna dig into that a little deeper for us?
Yeah, so, my character, being put through the ringer, I'm not very kind to
Mhm.
my character. It makes sense that when I was writing the 3rd book and I had to stop, like, the 1st chapter that he shows up and I was like, I had to stop and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's got all the signs of post-traumatic stress," which is
Mm.
completely normal considering all the stuff he's been through.
Okay.
But when he's going through these things and I'm trying to imagine to myself, it's like, how would I react? What is a normal person's reaction to these things? And how would that affect them psychologically? Um,
Right.
I don't try to like bash people over the head with it, like
Mhm.
this is anxiety, bash, bash, but just try to present it in
Sure.
a natural way and then, highlighting the importance of family, friends, and dealing with it. How, how would you deal with this going forward?
Right.
And it's not a magic fix. Like just all of a sudden you tell somebody about it and then boom, you're done. You're fixed.
Right.
It's an ongoing process and stuff, and things pile on top. And I've tried to present that in a whole and with wholesome messages and stuff like that. Importance of dealing
Okay.
with it.
Alright. So Callum, is he like you said, was he born in the normal world, or was he born in the fantasy world?
He was born in the normal world.
Okay.
Without giving spoilers away, um,
One of his parents was
yes, yeah.
okay.
There's, a history with both of his parents actually, but,
Okay.
I don't wanna give too much of it away because we're learning a bit more as we go through the series about his mother, and then
Mhm.
later on, we're gonna learn more about his father.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so the story of the outsider is again another common theme for a lot of writers, and it sounds
yes.
like you're tapping into that as well.
Mhm, yeah.
Is that correct?
A bit. It's more of he's got this connection to both sides
Okay.
because he's human, but he's
Mhm.
also magical. So it's a matter of like how does he fit into the grand scheme of things because he's a part of both worlds.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I should have asked this off the top. I'm sorry. Do you consider the series adult, young adult?
A young adult, new adult. So it's like a teens and 20s kind of crossover, but I've had
Okay.
everybody from my 8-year-old son who's swiped my books to read all the fighting adventure parts, all the way up to octogenarians. So it depends on what you're into. Like
Mhm.
I love Harry Potter. I'm not a middle grade student, and that was its target audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Also, a very important component of storytelling is romance. Is
Mhm.
there romance in your books at all?
There
Does
is, there
Callum
is.
have a
Yeah.
significant other?
Well, I have let slipped a few times, so I guess it's not a secret anymore, but my character, Callum Walker, does fall in love in the 4th book.
Okay.
Um, but I don't do spicy romance,
Sure.
so I steer away from that because I want it to be able to be enjoyed by younger audiences as well as older audiences.
Mhm.
There's no sex scenes in my books, but there is the more of the emotional aspects of romance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And that's because romance novels are the most popular genre. So,
Mhm.
and the best stories
Yes.
usually do contain a romance element in them as
I think
well.
it would
So,
be unrealistic to write a character and have them, go so in depth to their life without them
right.
having to experience these emotions, such as romance and love, and
Right.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So you did mention book 5. So,
I'm working
gonna
on book
ask you
5.
how many books are there you plan
I
to have in the series, or you don't know yet?
I don't know yet.
Okay,
I know where the series is gonna end, I just don't know how many it's gonna take to get there. I'm aiming for between 6 and 9,
okay,
but at the same time, I'm also, m may or may not be working on a dystopian Robin Hood meets Romeo and Juliet with hints of Hunger Games because I
okay.
kinda need to do something else as well in my
Right.
creative juices.
Okay, very cool. So that leads into my next question, unless you have something more you wanna say about your, Callum Walker series.
Yeah, no, I'm working on my 5th. This 4th book I was hoping to have out 2024, but because I'm getting later into the series, I'm getting more in depth into the series and stuff, it's probably gonna be closer to, like, 18 months before the next one comes out.
Okay, very good. And you just mentioned another series that you're working on, a dystopian or a story, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't wanna lock you into a series ahead of
Yeah.
getting ahead of ourselves here. So you're working on that, anything more you wanna say about that or about any other projects that you're working on?
Um, I I would love to write in many different genres, and I
Mhm.
am not stuck with one genre. I know
Okay.
some people will say, "Oh, I'm not into the fantasy genre," and that's fine. I mean, if we were all into the same thing, it'd be a very boring world.
Sure.
But if you follow me along and you keep following me, you'll see that I do write into other genres. I just have only published my first few books, but, I've been writing for 34 years. I'm not gonna stop anytime soon.
Okay, very cool. Is there anything else that hasn't come up that you would like to bring up at this time?
Just that, you guys, if you wanna follow me, you can find my links, to my Instagram and Facebook on my website. It's jmshawauthor.com. My links are on the bottom of my page, and there's also my books are also listed on my website with links to find them online.
All right, very cool. Well, it was a blast talking to you, Jennifer.
Yes,
Sorry about messing up the schedule this morning.
that's
Some
okay.
off
I'm glad I was
off
2 hours early instead of 2 hours late.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just planning to go for a walk, and then I got the email just in time. I was going, "Oh, I got time for a walk," but, fortunately, I got contacted, so it all turned out well, and, I really enjoyed, talking to you about your writing.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's always lovely. I mean, who doesn't wanna talk about their passions, right?
Absolutely. So, but with that, I wish you the best of luck, and, I guess in 18 months, maybe we'll talk again.
Yeah, and if you're in Edmonton this weekend, I'll be at West Side Chapters doing a book signing Saturday and Sunday.
All right, very cool. And with that, I wish you all the best in your future projects.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, take care now. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Okay, bye bye.